wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So the Prophet ﷺ in the hadith, he actually said, لا يحل لامرأة تؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر أن تسافر مسيرة يوم أو 3 أيام بغير زوج أو محرم. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith that it is not permissible for a woman to travel a distance of 3 days without her husband or a mahram. Yet there is another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ tells Adi ibn Hatim, in the hadith in where he tells Adi ibn Hatim, he tells him, هل رأيت الحيرة? Did you see Al-Hira? Now Al-Hira is a city in Iraq. And he answered, no, ولكني أنبئت عنها. No, but I was told about it. So the Prophet ﷺ told him that there's going to come a time where a woman ترتحل الضعينة لا تخاف إلى بيت الله الحرام لا تخاف أحدا إلا الله, where the older woman would go all the way from Al-Hira all the way to Bayt Allah, where she would not be afraid of anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the first group of scholars, they said that it is impermissible for a woman to travel a distance without a mahram, period. Whether she was going for Hajj, talab al-ilm, or whether, regardless of whether it is safe or not safe to go. That's the first opinion. The second opinion, in their response to the hadith of Adi ibn Hatim, they responded that that hadith is not giving us a ruling, but that hadith is giving us more of an informative clause or informative hadith, and not necessarily telling us of a ruling. But the ruling is in the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said it is impermissible for a woman to travel 3 days of a distance without a husband or a mahram. So that was the first opinion. The second opinion, they actually took and looked at both a hadith, and they said, well, if we're talking about a distance of 3 days, that would actually mean that if she would be traveling for something that is like talab al-ilm or hajj or with a group of women, that is ma'muna. What does ma'muna mean? Ma'muna actually means where it is safe. So they looked at the part about security and safety, and they said, well, that's what the hadith of Adi ibn Hatim says. It was focusing on the part that it was لا تخاف ترتحل الضعينة. The older woman would migrate and she would not be afraid. In other words, if there is security, if there is no fitna, and she's going for here, it was saying that she was going ترتحل الضعينة من الحيرة إلى بيت الله. She would be from Al-Hira to Bayt Allah, and it was for a cause of one, deen or talab al-ilm. They considered that, well, if this is there, the reason, plus 2, the security in where her deen, her nafs, her body, her ird, her aql, her mind, all of that is secure, then they considered if she, not alone, but if she would have a rifqa, they called it ma'muna, a rifqa ma'muna, a group that she is with in where we can depend on them to give her the security, to give her the good company, to protect her deen, protect her ird, protect her nafs, etc. So they considered that it would be based on that condition. That was the second opinion in where Abu al-Walid al-Baji and a couple other scholars, specifically from the Maliki madhab, they considered that it was permissible in that sense. The third opinion, they restricted it and said, well, this is restricted just for one, if we're talking about talab al-ilm, or if we're talking about deen, such as going for hajj, etc., and it would be restricted to either the husband, the women, a group of women that are ma'munat, that are secure, safe, and good in their deen, salihat, and number three, the husband or the brother. In other words, they said within that, and they restricted it to that. What is the preponderant? Number one is that when we speak about preponderance, there is a general rule in fiqh that says, al-hukmu ala shay'i far'un an tasawwurihi. Whenever you want to make a ruling, it has to be based on the data and the understanding of the situation. In other words, it's not enough to understand the text. We can't just look at the text and not understand the situation. We have to correlate the two together, because everything in Islam, in Maqasid al-Sharia, is really about connecting the two, connecting the legal maxims, the text, with the situation, with the reality on ground. So when you actually look on ground, I think a lot of times the sisters are going for tourism and saying, well, it's a group of sisters and they're going on a tour. Or probably it's okay, we're going together, and it's really sad to say that I've seen many situations where the sisters were lenient. I'm not necessarily saying that the sisters are not practicing their deen or considerate over their deen. But we could definitely see that when a sister is alone, that men do recognize that she's an easy treat, an easy target for them. And that many times, because of the feminist rhetoric that is right now spewing within the society, and it's really sad to say that we have even da'iyat that are right now absorbing the feminist rhetoric and putting a halal label on it. And this is extremely dangerous. When the Prophet ﷺ and when Islam had regulated that safar al-mar'a bighayri mahram is haram, that a woman would travel without a mahram is haram, it wasn't to restrict a woman from her freedom, but it was to consider that her security is a priority. It was to consider that the preservation of her deen, the preservation of her nafs, the preservation of her aql and all of that, and the preservation of her ilm and her chastity is a priority. It wasn't to restrict her, but it was to restrict others from thinking that they can have easy access to her. It's not to restrict her, but it's to restrict those men that have marad in their qalb, that have a disease in their heart, from thinking that they can have easy access to that woman. It wasn't restricting you, but it was restricting others. That's number one. Number two is that when we actually think and we say, well, there is security, I can easily call 911, etc. But I would like to say that when we see how the society is acting around us, fitna is actually increasing and not decreasing. So therefore, if we think that, yes, the society is safe, sorry, but we actually have it wrong. The fitna has increased and not decreased. So I would say, looking at al-hukmu ala shay'i far'un an tasawwurihi, looking at the reality, I would say, sister, preserve your deen. Travel with a mahram. If you can't find a mahram, wallahi, there's nothing more valuable than your deen, than your chastity, and then your nafs. There's nothing more valuable. That's the highest of value. Wait till you have a mahram. Wait till you find a rifqa ma'muna. Yes, it is a considerable opinion if it's a large group of sisters that are mu'minat. But even when we say traveling with a group of sisters that are mu'tamanat actually means that we can depend on them. It's to be limited that the sisters, when they're around, they're walking together, they're not acting, let me call it, lacking muru'ah. What is lacking muru'ah? Muru'ah is rarely talked about in our society. We talk about halal and haram, and we're not talking about al-muru'ah, where we're seeing sisters lacking muru'ah. They would be walking down, and they're constantly just laughing, giggling, and trying to do a selfie without even taking consideration of who's around and the men that are around. It's always just trying to seek attraction. Muru'ah is fading away. So when we talk about sisters that are mu'tamanat, they consider and they understand. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ فَيَطْمَعَ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ, and do not be lenient with your voices, so that those that have heart diseases in their hearts would not take advantage of you. At the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَضْرِبْنَ بِأَرْجُلِهِمْ. Why? أَلْ يُعْلَمَ مَا يُخْفِينَ مِنْ زِينَتِهِمْ. It's don't even strike with your feet. It's all about not even, the beauty is not even appearing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling them, don't even let others feel and even sense your femininehood in public. Not even sense it in public. In other words, when we say mu'tamanat, that actually means they take their deen seriously. They take their modesty seriously. They take their iman seriously. They don't walk and constantly giggling and constantly just trying to not recognize that they're in public. Why are you giggling in public? Why are you trying to take a selfie with you yourself? Somehow giving me a pose. That's a pose, sorry, but a wife for a husband. In the street? On the street, you're giving that? Why that pose? Allah al-Musta'an. So when we say mu'tamanat, I think we need to underline what it means and what scholars actually consider. What scholars actually consider to defining who is a mu'tamanat. So even if we were to take that opinion, this is extremely important to consider. She's salihah, they are a group of salihat women. They are a group that is going for either talab al-ilm or for ibadah, and they're actually considering al-waqi' and the reality and how to be safe. I hope I answered that.
Due to the small amount of time that we have left, I will be giving the audience a chance to ask questions. So if you have any question that you want to ask the chair of, raise your hand, please. Now. Can you see that again? Can women what?
Can a woman initiate divorce?
Can a woman initiate a divorce? So in Islam, there's a difference between al-khulu' and divorce and al-fasakh. What are those? So divorce is what a man initiates, which is called the talaq. A woman doesn't initiate talaq, but she can seek khulu'. So the man, talaq, is in the hands of a man. But al-khulu' is in the hands of the man and the woman together. Al-fasakh is in the hands of al-qadi. Who's al-qadi? Al-qadi is basically the imam. Al-fasakh is done in situations where the qadi can look in the situation and review and evaluate the situation if there is darar, if there is harm, whether the man has an issue with his deed, probably drinks, does not pray. Two, whether he has an issue with his nafs. Maybe he has some kind of a disease, something with the body, something with the nafs, some kind of a disease that she says, well, I can't handle this. Number three, with his aql. There's a mental health issue that she doesn't want to be basically impacted. Or maybe with her. She's married and he decided to get married to a second wife, and that is affecting her mentally. So she can basically raise it to the qadi and seek fasakh. All right? Number three or four, the issue of chastity. Maybe he has an erectile dysfunction. And in that situation, she can seek al-fasakh because of his incapability of completing, let's say, fulfilling her sexual desire. Number five, which is al-mal. In a situation where he cannot give her the money satisfaction, the money management, or probably is not working, is not doing his role, then in that situation she can raise it to the qadi and say, there's an injustice that is happening on me. The qadi will evaluate it and actually say, yes, I can give you fasakh and keep your mahr too. Give you your mitakhir, give you your own completed dowry, the alimony, etc., and she can get all of that. Il-khulu', on the other hand, is a little different because il-khulu', it's a mutual agreement where she would say, you know what, you're a perfect man, but not for me. So I'm gonna let go of my mahr and we're going to agree, that's it, we're just going to separate. There is no limit to the number of times for khulu'. What if he refuses khulu' and he says, well, I'm not interested? What happens then? The qadi will look into it. If there is a valid reason, he will actually do not al-khulu' but al-fasakh. If there is no valid reason, then they can work out together al-khulu' and how they want to basically trade for the different losses or how they want to trade all of that. All right? So I hope I answered that question. Go ahead. Yeah, come on up. You're shy?
My question is, during our menaces, when exactly do we know when to perform ghusl? Is it like after the ghusl bida, that's what they call it in Arabic? Right. Do we wait more, or is it just that? Like, is that just our sign?
Jimmy, so there are three different things when we look at one, which is called the white cervical mucus, but you don't necessarily have to wait for the white cervical mucus. Because the white cervical mucus doesn't actually get discharged usually until after a couple of days, after ending your period. Number two, which is basically the blood stopping. Well, the blood stopping, how do I actually know whether the blood stopped or not? So in that situation, you're going to see whether, one, you're getting the bleeding still, but that's not enough. So two, if the area is dry. In other words, you're not getting bloody discharge. You can wait for a whole day to make sure that you're not going to get more spotting. If you didn't get more spotting, the day that you had waited that you did not know, you were in doubt whether your period had finished or not, during that day, on that day, then you can wait till the end of the day, and then if you discover that you were not spotting, you didn't have your period, then you can make ghusl at the end of that day, and then make up the prayers that you were not aware that your period had ended. Got it? So you would wait in these two situations, cervical mucus, but you don't have to wait for the cervical mucus. And two, which is no more bleeding, all right? And no more spotting, and you can wait for that one too, all right? I hope I answered that one. Oh, she's got a question.
Can I go up, like, up there, does anyone down? Yeah.
Here's a question. So the first one, like, what is Islam saying about dating but not haram for the sake of marriage? And then the other one has synthetic hair. If it's permissible or not.
Pedicure?
Synthetic hair.
Synthetic hair. Okay, got it. I think the first question you were talking about dating? Okay, so in Islam, the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا اجْتَمَعَ رَجُلٌ وَامْرَأَ إِلَّا وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ بَيْنَهُمَا. No man and a woman are together, but the shaitan will be the third. In other words, dating in Islam is strictly forbidden and very obviously haram. If the man and the woman want to get to know one another, there would be a mahram present. Her brother, her father, there would be a mahram present. Why? He doesn't necessarily have to be sitting at the table, but on site. Come over, maybe you guys go together, maybe to a restaurant, maybe your dad is sitting 3 or 4 or 5 tables at a restaurant, but your father is present. Your brother is present. Why? This is not because we're doubting you, but this is in order to tell the man, me as her brother, I'm there. I want you to know that I'm supporting my sister, I'm supporting my daughter. So when we speak about the mahram being there, it's to give you support and to give him restrictions. To give him restrictions. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ was talking about that, dating, which is مَجْتَمَعَ رَجُلٌ وَامْرَأَ إِلَّا وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ بَيْنَهُمَا, this is in order to tell us preserving your deen and preserving your ird is a priority in Islam. Yes, you might actually say, but I want to get to know him. I want to make sure this. Ladies, men know how to be mischievous a lot more than you think. And that's why you want your father, your brother, to be the one to help you navigate the reality and the truth of that person. Men, when it's time for them to get to what they want, and you all know what I'm talking about, they'll be the sweet talkers. They'll be the nicest people, and they'll know how to get to whatever they want. So Islam tells you, listen, but he doesn't dare do it when a man is around. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, listen, because I know how men think, I want a man to be with you. That way, he cannot play games in doing sweet talk to you and manipulating you. That's why the mahram is there. The mahram is basically there to let the man reveal the reality of himself. So you won't easily get manipulated. Because that reality is the reality that you're going to be living with when you're married. That's the reality you're going to be living with when you're married, girl. So that's why you want your mahram to be with you. Don't be fooled by that dating process and the sweet talk and etc. No. Make sure you get your mahram with you. Because that will uncover the reality of what really he really is when other men are around. And guess what? The most important way to navigate the reality of a guy is not when he's with you, but it's actually when he's on the other times. Do a background check. Let your father ask about him, how he is when he's at school, or when he's with his friends, or when he's playing basketball, or when whatever he's doing at work, etc. That's the reality that he will be living in when he's at home. So you want to make sure you get the truth of what that man is. Because for men, when it's time for them to, let me say, live their lust, they're very, very manipulative. Very manipulative. Because they just want the treat. Don't be an easy treat. And that's why Islam tells you, no, I don't want you to be an easy treat. I want a man to be with you. Because I know you're too kind and too emotional. You'll accept any word. You'll accept any word. I want a man to be with you to make sure that your deen, your nas, your aql, your mal are all going to be preserved. That's why the mahram is there. It's not to doubt you, but it's to doubt him. It's to doubt him. It's to make sure that you're secure. Did I answer your question, my dear? All right. The second question you were about synthetic hair. So the Prophet ﷺ said, لَعْنَ اللَّهُ الْوَاصِلَ وَالْمُسْتَوْصِلَ. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had cursed the woman that does extensions and the woman that it is being done to. In terms of extensions, scholars had differences of opinions on whether that is only talking about natural hair or whether that is speaking about synthetic as well. Or whether that's, when we say synthetic, that actually means something that is not natural, whether you're putting in wool, you're putting in different materials. In other words, it's not necessarily real. Now, scholars had differences of opinions on that because they basically, some had regarded that the reason why the Prophet ﷺ had actually said, لَعْنَ اللَّهُ الْوَاصِلَ وَالْمُسْتَوْصِلَ, is because the hadith is right there. We're going to take it literally, regardless of whatever reason is behind it. The second group of scholars, they said, no, it's not an issue of literal stance, but it's an issue of the reason behind it. What is the reason? They said that is basically because of cheating. So they said if the woman is, this is the second opinion, if the woman is not using natural hair, but is using something synthetic, then in that situation, using something synthetic, and if she's not using it for the purpose of cheating, they regarded that it would be permissible. The third opinion, they said no, synthetic or not, the hadith is clear in where لَعْنَ اللَّهُ الْوَاصِلَ, in where a woman, whether she is doing extensions, whether it is synthetic or whether it is natural hair, at the end of the day, she's basically connecting with something. They said this is verbatim. This is out for straightforward, and right there the word is clear. So the Malikis, on the other hand, they said, well, in regards to putting hair, so kind of like a wig, they said, well, that's not wasl. That's not putting an extension, but that's actually laying. That's not extending, but that's putting. It's putting something on it. So that's why the Malikis, they regarded that is, or the wigs are permissible, and that in that sense, wigs are permissible according to the Malikis, but the other scholars, they said wigs or extensions, whether the first opinion, regardless of whether it is synthetic or whether it is natural, it's haram. The second opinion, no, natural is haram, but synthetic is not. The third opinion, any type of connecting is haram, but not putting. Not putting like a wig. I hope I answered that one. What is the preponderant? Wallahu a'lam, synthetic hair is not haram unless you are using it to deceive a potential candidate for marriage. Then in that situation, it would be a form of what is called gharar. What is al-gharar? Al-gharar is a way to deceive a potential candidate or a way to deceive someone that you are going to be making some relationship with. We're talking about whether a relationship in any kind of a contract. then that would be a form of gharar, that would be haram. So if, wallahu a'lam, if the synthetic hair is not to deceive, is not to manipulate, synthetic hair as an extension is not haram in that regard, wallahu a'lam. Oh, there's another, couple of questions. She had a question, hold on.
Because due to the time, we won't be able to.
No more questions?
No more questions.
Really?
The Sheikh has a 30-minute session, inshallah, so we only, the Sheikh has a 30-minute session with the and then after that, we'll be going to the main hall after the session with the
No more questions? No. I mean, I don't mind. I don't mind. So, do we do it here?
Yeah.
Right now? Okay. So I guess we will be, I can just complete it, keep going?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so we'll take more questions then. Yeah, I know, it's like, wait, go ahead, my dear.
My question follows there's eyelash extensions follow the same.
Do eyelash extensions follow the same ruling? Number one, the scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether the extensions are exclusive to the head or whether they are, they're basically anywhere on the body. All right? Yep.
So there is a 30-minute session by the Sheikh, so if you guys, inshallah, then we will remain hall. So you guys can stay, inshallah.
Hold on, let me answer the question.
Thank you guys so much.
Sorry about that. All right. So like I said, scholars had differences of opinions on whether the extension is including any type of extension on all the body or whether it is exclusive to the head. The preponderant wallahu a'lam is that eyelashes are not haram, all right? But you want to make sure that it is only done in front of mahrams. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُمْ, that they should not reveal their beauty. In other words, any type of cosmetics, whether we're talking about eyelashes, whether we're talking about makeup, whether we're talking about anklets, whether we're talking about any type of cosmetics, you don't want to reveal it in front of non-mahrams. So if it's an all-women event, if it's your husband, it is permissible to wear eyelashes, inshallah, and it is not part of a wasiyah. Got it? All right. You also had a question.
I have a heart condition.
Okay.
And I want to go to Hajj Park. And if I give medicine to Hajj Park.
Fair enough. So the question is, if someone has a heart condition or a medical condition that basically makes Hajj and going for Hajj hard on them, if they are living, is that permissible for them to somehow give someone else to do Hajj on their behalf? If a person has a medical condition that disables them from doing the different manasik, then in that situation, they can pay someone to do Hajj on their behalf, even if they are alive. All right? All right. Go ahead, my dear.
If a woman is an orphan, or if she doesn't have a father in her life, or if she's an only child, or she's a revert and she doesn't have any people in her life who are willing to act as a mahram for her, what should she do?
Fair enough. If a woman is a revert, or if a woman does not have mahrams, she's an orphan, etc., what does she do in that situation? So in that situation, have a group of women be around you, or if we're talking about traveling, then in that situation, consider safety, consider that as a priority, and seek a rifqa ma'muna, a group that will be giving you the support that is needed from a mahram, and consider that as a priority. Number two, if it is marriage, the Prophet ﷺ said, as-sultanu waliyyu man la waliyya lah. What is a sultan? A sultan is not the sultan where he's wearing a turban and all of that. A sultan waliyyu man la waliyya lah. to mean the person in charge. So if there is a qadi, if there is an Islamic center in where the sheikh, is there has to be the Islamic centers, they have to have, if I can have the audience, please keep it quiet. Salaam alaikum. Please keep it quiet, I cannot focus. I don't want to give the wrong fatwa. This is serious work. All right. The Prophet ﷺ said, As-Sultan waliyu man la waliya lah. The Islamic centers are supposed to be in charge of having some kind of a committee that does background check for the men, that does give, let's call it marriage counseling, to help the women navigate as they live their life. In other words, these committees to act on behalf of the wali that is not present in doing the job. All right. So in that situation, if you are to propose to ask someone that is experienced, probably elderly, and you see somebody that probably has the wisdom to act on behalf of your wali in marriage, not as your wali to travel with him, but we're talking about as your wali in marriage to do the job on your behalf, to probably background check, to probably interview the candidate for marriage, then in that situation, you can ask someone that you see that wisdom, that you see that experience in them, to act on behalf of your wali that you were not capable of having due to you being an orphan or a revert. All right, so you can, it's called the intidab. So in other words, you can basically propose to someone that you see in them this qualification to act on behalf of your wali, and they have to be honest, they have to be trustworthy, and they also have to keep their distance from you. So in other words, it's not really your mahram, but you are seeking their help and seeking their support to help you in that situation to do what the mahram would have been doing if they were present. All right? Go ahead, my dear.
Can I interrupt really quick?
Go ahead.
We have this room until 7:30.
So what time is it?
7:15. 7:30.
Okay.
So it's up to you if you want to continue asking the questions. If so, I'll have all the sisters return back to their seats and kindly just raise their hand and shout their question from there. That way everyone isn't like in line or coming down.
That's okay.
Right?
Okay. It's okay.
Do you want to answer your question?
Okay.
It's okay. We'll ask the questions.
My question was, if a man and a woman are planning to get married, right, and they have a nikah contract, and she basically says, I don't think I'm really strong enough to handle if you've had like a second or third or fourth wife, and they proceed forward with the marriage, and they agree. That was a mutual agreement, and he then goes back on his word and maybe marries someone else. Is that contract not null and void? Is that plausible, like, cause for divorce from a woman's perspective?
So this is actually a very controversial issue between scholars. In putting a marriage...
Really quick, sorry.
What?
I'll just announce everyone else. Assalamualaikum, guys.
The girls, not guys.
Sorry, sisters. What we'll do is we'll ask our questions just from our seats. We'll just raise our question, we'll raise our hand, we'll answer or shout our question, and then the sheikh will give us time to give us the correct answers. Does that sound like a plan? Much better? Okay. So in your seats, think of your question. Once you get a chance, just stand at your seat, shout your question, and then, because we have this room until 7:30, and then everybody's going to go back to the main auditorium. Make sense?
Okay.
This room's all yours. Knock yourselves out.
All right. So scholars actually had differences of opinions on whether even putting a condition in the marriage contract that the man would not marry a second, third, or fourth wife. Why did they even have different opinions on whether that is a valid condition or not? So the reason for that is that the Prophet ﷺ actually said any condition that is not fi kitabillah is bad. Any condition that is not in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a void or an invalid condition. So the first group of scholars, they considered, well, look, the hadith is pretty straightforward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually said that a man can actually marry 2, 3, 4. It's really clear, straightforward ayah. So the first group of scholars, they said, well, this condition to restrict a man from marrying a second and a third wife is basically restricting what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded as permissible. So therefore they considered that the whole condition is an invalid condition because it basically contradicts what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded permissible. That's the first opinion. The second opinion, they said, well, no. Any contract that people would do if they are to mutually agree to give up on a right that Islam had considered as valid from the first place, but this person basically, with no compulsion, they basically gave up on their right to do and engage in a specific agreement or in a specific, some kind of a transaction, some kind of any agreement, whether we're talking about marriage or any kind of a contract. If the person mutually agrees to give up on their right, and that's why on that basis, the other person agreed to go into this relationship, and therefore this isn't necessarily contradicting the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they explained the hadith to mean any condition that is not in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to mean any haram condition. Such as, well, I would agree to, for example, work in, maybe rent my house on a condition that it would be only rented to sell something haram, to sell pork or whatever it is. This would be an invalid condition. This condition is void, right? So the second opinion, they regarded that, no, if the condition is halal, if the condition is something that Islam did not say that it was haram, then it's a permissible condition. The third opinion, they went into more details in where, okay, well, if the condition they mutually agreed, does that make the contract invalid, or does the condition become invalid? So what does that mean? Let's say the woman A and man B, they got married. And then the condition was not to get married to a second woman. But then the man, later on, he decided that he wanted to get married. He got married to woman C. Does the marriage between A and B become invalid because he broke the condition? Or is the second marriage, the third marriage, or basically the marriage to woman C, is that invalid? To say invalid actually means the relationship is zina. See what I'm saying? To actually say it's invalid actually means it's zina. In other words, the relationship between A and B is zina now. The relationship between B and C is zina now. Can you see how big this is? The scholars of fiqh, very smart. Very smart. So the Hanafi, they said, wait a minute, no, it's not that either of those are an invalid contract. The relationships, marriage A and B and marriage B and C, are all valid. It's a halal relationship because if we are to assume that this is a zina relationship, but we've got all the conditions for an actual marriage. The wali is there, the consent is there, the shuhud, the witnesses are there, and everything is there. The bulugh, they've reached the age of puberty, everything is there. So, in other words, the marriage is valid, but the condition, if he breaks the condition, then he had committed the sin, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, awfu bil-uqud. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, be committed to your promises. then therefore he had committed a sin in breaking the condition and the promise. But the marriage is valid, whether from B and A or whether from B and C, right? But he had committed a sin in breaking the condition. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Awfu bil uqud," the Prophet ﷺ actually said the most important agreement that you would be committed to, مَسْتَحْلَلْتُمْ بِهِ الْفُرُوجِ. The agreement that you should be most committed to is the agreement that you had regarded their private parts as lawful. That's marriage. Did I answer your question, my dear? All right, go ahead, my dear. You know what? We're going to break her condition. Come on over. Right? Makes sense, right? It's still lawful, right? Yeah. I can see. I can barely hear you even though you're next to me. All right. Can a woman attend the masjid if she's actually on her menses? So, number one is that the Prophet ﷺ, when you look at one, the hadith, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. Two, that the ayah actually says, when talking about the masjid and talking about the different restrictions, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally says, for إِلَّا جُنُوبًا or جُنُوبًا إِلَّا عَابِرِي سَبِيلٍ. When a person is in a state of janaba, they could only pass through the masjid when they're عَابِرِي سَبِيلٍ, just because they're passing by. There is another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually said that I don't regard this masjid as a lawful place for somebody that is in a state of janaba, which is after intimacy, or in a state of menstruating. Now, when you actually look at number one, which is إِلَّا عَابِرِي سَبِيلٍ, the first opinion regarded that, well, no, a woman, while she's on a state of her period, she should not be in the masjid. She shouldn't be in the masjid because the hadith is actually telling us that she shouldn't. Opinion number two said, well, wait a minute. The ayah that said, إِلَّا عَابِرِي سَبِيلٍ is telling us that al-mukth, for al-junub, for a person in a state of janaba, that they shouldn't be staying there long unless they're passing by. But they considered that when a state of janaba, it's totally different than a state of period. Because a state of janaba, 5 minutes later, you're all done. You take a shower, you're finished. But a woman on her period, it might actually take a week, 10 days, according to the Hanafi, and 15 days according to the Shafi'i. That's a very long time. So they said, we cannot do qiyas, an analogy, and compare a woman in her state of period to a person that is in a state of janaba. So those are two different categories, two different situations. You can't put them on the same category. That's the second opinion. The third opinion, they actually had some issues with the hadith. He said, actually, we don't necessarily regard that hadith as authentic. And they said, if the woman is capable of making sure that she's not going to contaminate the area, then in that situation, she can go to the masjid. So the other scholar said, and how do you prove that? I said, sure. Remember that black woman that the Prophet ﷺ had wanted to pray Salat al-Janazah on when she was coming to clean the masjid? He didn't tell her not to come and clean the masjid while she was on her period. In fact, he didn't comment. No report was there to comment on that woman's purity or on that woman's whatsoever relating to period. And for sure, she was getting her period. That's basically the evidence. They said, here's our evidence. So they said, as long as she doesn't contaminate the place, it's not, the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-mu'min la yanjus. A believer does not become impure. In other words, they said, well, when we're looking at this hadith, the woman herself is not impure, but the actual bleeding is impure. So they said the ayah, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنَ الْمَحِيضِ قُلْ هُوَ أَذَى, that the period itself, that the bleeding itself, that is al-adha. That is what is impure, not the actual woman. What is the evidence? Well, the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidah Aysha said, كُنْتُ أَتَعَرَّقُ الْعَرْقَ وَأَنَا حَائِمٌ. And the Prophet ﷺ would eat after her. What is أَتَعَرَّقُ الْعَرْقَ? You know when you hold a chicken and you start munching on it, on the bones? Sayyidah Aysha said, the Prophet ﷺ would munch after me when I had my period. So what is that proving? That the Prophet ﷺ did not regard her, even when Sayyidah Aysha, the Prophet ﷺ said, نَاوِلِينِ الْخُمْرَةِ, give, not al-khamra, il-khumra, give me the prayer mat. And she said, I've got my period. He said, حَيْضَتُكِ لَيْسَتْ بِيَدِكِ, your period is not in your hands. Therefore, this is not something that you necessarily are considered as contaminated. What is contaminated is basically the bleeding itself. If you're capable of making sure that the place is not going to get contaminated, the place is going to be secure, clean, then you can actually attend, wallahu a'lam, attend the halaqah, give the halaqah, even if you're on your period, based on that opinion. Go ahead, my dear. Yes, ma'am. The girl in the purple.
Your adopt a son that you become your record.
Good job. If you adopt a son, does he become your mahram or not? Number one is that if you adopted the son and you breastfed the son, that in that situation, if he has been breastfed for 5 full feedings, and if the child was nursed for within the time frame of 2 years, then in that situation, that son does become your son. That boy becomes your son as your milk son. Now, what if I were to use prolactin? What is prolactin? It's a prolactin pill. In order to basically generate milk, you're going to have to probably either that you got your baby or use prolactin. Prolactin, basically a pill. The woman, even if she's never been married, she would basically get that milk starting to generate. Scholars actually had differences of opinion on whether prolactin that generates milk in you, on whether that milk that you started getting due to that pill intake, on whether that makes the relationship between you and the baby be a mother and a milk mother and a milk son. Why did they have differences of opinions? Very interesting reason. It was really because of hadith Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. When Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the Prophet ﷺ, him and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq were fleeing Mecca. In the middle of the way, they see Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And then they asked Abdullah ibn Mas'ud if they could actually take milk. But then Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, well, I don't own these, so in other words, I don't have the permission to give you a cup of milk. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him to get a sheep that basically doesn't have milk naturally. So he brings him a sheep, wipes on its head, on its back, wipes on its glands, and the milk glands puff up with milk. Prophet ﷺ milks that sheep, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, teach me how to do that. Teach me how to do that. What is a shahid? A shahid is that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud gave him a sheep that was not naturally full of milk, but the Prophet ﷺ, let's say miraculously, let that sheep get milk. In other words, the milk that was produced is not belonging to the owner because this is a different method. This is not a natural process. So the first opinion that scholars had said is that, well, looking at that hadith, that tells us this, that prolactin pills and getting this milk production is not the reason, or in other words, it's not a valid reason to make this woman a milk mother and the son a milk son. The second opinion considered that yes, she would be considered a milk mother and the baby basically a milk son, even though it was due to a prolactin pill. Why? They said, well, at the end of the day, it's her body that produced it. Whether you induced the milk through a pill or whether you induced it through a natural cause, at the end of the day, the body basically produced something that is milk and it carries some of her DNA. In other words, this DNA that is in the milk, right there, the boy is consuming it, the girl is consuming it, therefore it acts as the same reason to an actual milk. Exactly like when we're speaking about any other body fluid. It's part of you, and therefore the baby becomes your milk son. I hope I answered that question. Go ahead, my dear.
Why do we have to wear like a hijab if there's not a hijab?
So there are certain things. Why do we have to wear hijab if we're praying at home, no one's there, and there's no reason to wear it? Some certain ahkam are tawqifiyya. What is tawqifi? Tawqifi actually means that we go by the text. Not all the ahkam shari'ah, not all the Islamic rulings were known to why the illah is there. We don't necessarily know all the analogies and all the reasons for all the Islamic rulings. Certain things were basically وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ رَسُولَهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِمْ. خلاص, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it does not befit for a believing man and a believing woman, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees a matter, that they would basically put their opinion on top of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's opinion. So in that situation, these things are tawqifiyya. Tawqifiyya to me, that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught the Prophet ﷺ. That's how we took it, that's how we practice it. Do we have the reason? We don't have the reason. Why is Dhuhr 4 rak'ahs and not 5? Why is Fajr 2? Why can't we make it maybe 1.5? Maybe 2? Maybe 3? Maybe 4? Certain things, we don't necessarily have the complete reason for it, that at the end of the day, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول. سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. You just take it as is. Go ahead, my dear.
Is there any peculiar? How do we know which ruling to follow? We have to follow.
Fair enough. How do I know which ruling to follow when I actually see differences of opinions and they would go into these debates? Following on 5. Number 1, when you have differences of opinions, number 1, you want to seek a scholar that has the qualification. You know the qualification that they did their research. That's number 1. Number 2, you want to see al-wara, that this scholar is not giving you an answer to basically gain more audience and to gain more, let me say, compliments from the audience, but has the wara to actually answer despite all the objection from the society to go back to Quran and Sunnah. Quran and Sunnah. Number 3, Do your research. If you're not capable of doing research, then in that situation, do your research to seek someone that is doing the research. So do your research by, number one, don't give the data to sway the fatwa. Don't give the data to sway the fatwa. Do your research. Islam Q&A is a great website. A great website that would give you a lot of research, that would give you a lot of different hadith, that would give you very good information. Number four is that you need to be careful from fatwa shopping. So what does that mean? Whenever we have differences of opinions, there's a general rule, الخروج من الخلاف أولى. You always need to seek and have your wara. Don't go for the easiest answer, but go for the answer where you would be away from the differences of opinions. Number five, when you want to seek the fatwa, when you want to seek the ilm, it's very important that you too would do your homework and actually study Islam to be able to recognize the different deviations out there. Because we're living in an era where it's so easy to manipulate the masses, and it's so easy to claim ijazah, so easy to claim qualification, because there is no area to investigate who really holds it and who really doesn't. So you want to be careful with who you ask and who really deserves the qualification, and you need to do your homework too, to study as well. Because when you study, you protect your identity from being an easy target for those claiming qualification to target you. Go ahead, my dear. Yeah, go ahead. The girl with the mask. Yes.
And she goes up and she wants to give it.
How do you give her off? Give her off, okay. So, okay, fair enough. If a girl has been adopted, the Prophet ﷺ, like I said earlier, as-sultanu waliyyu man la waliyya lah. The person that is in charge, whether that's an Islamic center or whether the person that took care of her, he becomes and acts as her wali. All right? He becomes and acts as her wali because she's got no one else. All right? All right. The girl with the glasses. When following a madhab, are we supposed to follow every single thing in it or not? Number one is that the Prophet ﷺ, there is a very interesting book. It's called I'lamul Muwaqqi'in or A'lamul Muwaqqi'in. So what that book is it's really detailed, okay? It has a lot of different, it's very advanced. But one very interesting that he had mentioned is that when we're speaking about fatwa or madhab, the Prophet ﷺ did not follow a particular madhab. And no madhab would claim that they are the exclusive trace that traces back to the Prophet ﷺ. No madhab would claim that. But all the madhab had said, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيثُ فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. If the hadith is authentic, then that is the bond, or that is the school and the criterion and the manhaj or the path that I would consider. If the hadith is authentic, then that's my madhab. Now, having that being said, following one particular madhab is not necessarily wajib, but following what is preponderant is what is wajib. Not following a particular madhab. But learning a madhab helps you identify a lot. It makes talab al-ilm easy. I'm finished. If you want.
Okay, you have to take the PA system. So that's give and take 10 to 15 minutes.
You want to continue?
You can if you want.
Okay.
Or 15 minutes. Or one of the PA system does that.
What is a PA system? What, the lights are going to shut down?
The whole like announcement system, like the microphone.
Oh,
It's going to
okay.
interrupt you while you're speaking. So once that.
Okay, fair
Then
enough.
you're done.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Hold on, let's go that side. Go ahead, my dear. You want to, yeah, you can, you know what? Yeah, I can see a lot of questions. Go ahead, my dear, until she comes down. Make it loud. Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, let's see. If this is my friend's child, is he going to be a mahram to my mom?
If you nurse a child, does he become a mahram to your mother? The Prophet ﷺ said, يَحْرُمُ مِنَ الرَّضَاعِ مَا يَحْرُمُ مِنَ النَّسَبِ. This is a hadith. يَحْرُمُ مِنَ الرَّضَاعِ مَا يَحْرُمُ مِنَ النَّسَبِ. What is regarded as to be a mahram from biological relations is going to be the same exact way that we would analyze and we would do our analogy in milk relations. What does that mean? So you would be the mother for baby A. Your mother is the grandmother for baby A. Your sisters are the aunts for baby A. Your husband is the milk father for baby A. And you continue the rest. Got it? يحرم من الرضاع ما يحرم من النسب. Go ahead, my dear.
Alright. Okay, I wanted to know if it's allowed for a girl to wear pants in Islam, considering her career.
Considering her career. Okay. So in general, Islam did not necessarily put a certain attire in Islam, but put conditions of what hijab is. All right? Didn't put a restriction on where, yeah, abaya is the only thing, but put restrictions on what hijab should contain. In other words, number one, the hijab should not be defining the girl's or the woman's body. It should not be transparent. It should not be something that is revealing the sizes of her body or revealing any type of beautification. So in that situation, if she's wearing very baggy pants because of her job, for example, she needs to wear very baggy pants. So let's say she's maybe a medium and she's wearing 2X or 3X just because she wants it to be extremely baggy. All right, let's say a nurse, then in that situation it would be permissible if she were to wear, let's say, long shirt to cover the different sizes of her body. Then in that situation it would be permissible. All right, same thing. When we're talking about if we're removing all the different, let's say, the different things, for example, the beautification, etc., then in that situation, it would be permissible to dress that way. And it's important to advocate for yourself that you have the right, that your religion is to also be included. That your religion, they speak of inclusivity about different things. You also advocate for yourself that there are certain things that you would like to wear because it is part of your religion. Go ahead, Vinay.
Hi. I was wondering, what if you were traveling somewhere for the purpose of education, but your friend refused to go with you? Like, do they have to go with you, or like, let's say they were available, but they refused for any reason? And my second question is, does the mahram also accompany you on destination? And what if it's like a couple of years, they have to like stay with you, or like,
Fair enough. So the mahram is not obligated to go with you because they might actually have their circumstances too. But we would definitely recommend that they would accompany to give you also the consideration for your needs as well. But if, let's say, you don't find a mahram, remember, man taraka shay'an lillah awadahu Allahu khayran min. Whoever leaves something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you something that is better than what you had wanted. Yes, you might have gotten a scholarship to go to Harvard, you probably got a scholarship to go to Yale, but your mahram is not willing to accompany you. Wallahi, that degree that you would actually get from that university or whatever it is, wallahi, nothing is worth your deen. Uqsim billahi al-azim. No degree is worth your deen. You want to go to Harvard because your chances of getting a job are higher, because you're somehow the advantages, somehow the different, the things that society might give you, the privileges are probably even more, etc. Wallahi, no better privilege is more important than the privilege of going to Jannah. Uqsim billahi al-azim. Consider your deen as your priority. Consider your akhirah as your priority. So put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your priority, and man taraka shay'an lillahi awadahu Allah khayran min. You leave something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wallahi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you something better than what you had actually left. You were probably going to get a privilege, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised you. You leave it because you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will compensate you. He will give you something better than what you had actually had wanted. Therefore, consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, we would definitely encourage the mahram. Hey, accompany your sister, accompany your daughter, be with her. What if the mahram goes with you to the destination and then finds, let's say, a group of sisters that are mu'tamanat? So he went with you, and then there was a dorm, and this dorm, mashallah, very good pious sisters in the area. They rented a home together. They were seeing each other's deen, etc. Then in that situation, it would be permissible. Got it? All right. Go ahead, my dear.
I have two questions. The first one is, what ibadah is permissible during menstruation?
What ibadah is permissible? Well, we should say what ibadah is not permissible during menstruation. Number one is salat. Number two is siyam. Number three is tawaf while she's menstruating, unless for Ibn Taymiyyah, unless she wasn't capable of coming back for tawaf al-rukun, then in that situation she would do it. Scholars had differences of opinions on reading Quran. All right, they had differences of opinions on reading Quran, but they didn't have differences of opinions on doing dhikr. So doing dhikr, you can do dhikr while tasbih, istighfar, all of these, you can do it while you're menstruating. All right? Go ahead, my dear. The girl in the mask. Your mom's mahram is not your mahram, my dear. Your mom's mahram is your mom's mahram. Yeah, well, right, but at the end of the day, is that your mom's mahram is not your mahram. Who's your mahram? Huh? Who's your mahram? Got it? And I would like to say one thing, is that one of the biggest fitnas on you are really your relatives. Your cousin is a bigger fitna than somebody that is a stranger, because they had learned how to break a lot of those barriers. So you got to be careful. All right, go ahead, the girl in the back. Did anybody hear anything? Run, hurry. You were saying?
If you're a female nurse, is it permissible for you to take care of both genders?
If you're a female nurse, is it permissible for you to basically take care of both sexes. Genders is a different thing. But it is permissible for you to actually take care for medical reasons, for necessity, to actually take care of both sexes, male and female. It is definitely better if you can work probably in the OB department, or probably if you're capable of getting, let me say, your peers doing the male patients, but that's going to be extremely hard. It's not always easy, and especially if the head nurse, it's not always the same, especially if you're in the emergency room, etc. So it's not always easy, but you can actually work for male patients, but you want to make sure that you keep yourself away from the fitna. So wear gloves. Well, of course, you have to wear gloves when touching. Lower your gaze to the area that is restricted to the necessity of what you need to uncover as much as you can. Intermingling, you don't want to be chit-chatting, etc., but you want to, I would say, avoid the different fitan that probably relate to that field. Go ahead, my dear. Samia? Samia, how are you doing? Good. Go ahead, my dear. Does a woman, when a woman gets married, does her father-in-law become a mahram? Yes. There are three different ways of getting the mahramiyya. One is biological reasons. Two is milk reasons. Three is al-musahara. What is al-musahara? Al-musahara is due to marriage. So if you get married to a man, his father becomes a mahram onto you forever. Even if you divorce that man, his father will always be a mahram to you. Always. This is abai bu'ulatihin. This is the father of your husband. He'll always be a mahram to you, period. An ayah in Surah An-Nur, no doubt about it. I think we're all done with, there's another question. Go ahead, my dear. Can your stepdad be your mahram? That's a very good question. In general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned as part of those that are a mahram to you, the rabiba. What is a rabiba? A rabiba is basically the daughter of the woman he's married to. But then scholars actually had differences of opinions in regards to a rabiba. Because the first opinion regarded that a rabiba is basically the girl of the wife that he got married to. Then, okay, we agree until there. But then they went into a debate on whether she would be a rabiba only if he got married to the woman and this girl was young and grew up like his own daughter within his household. This is opinion number one. They said only if she was a young girl when he got married to her mother, and his interaction with the girl became like as if she was his own daughter. Opinion number two said no, it doesn't matter about the girl's age. That is, the stepdaughter's age. They said it doesn't matter about her age because at the end of the day, if the man gets married to the woman, the ayah was clear that he cannot get married to the daughter. الدخول في الأمهات يحرم البنات. By having a sexual relation with the mother and being intimate with her, that would make the daughter as basically haram for him to get married to her. So they said regardless of the age. Now, one thing out of these two opinions, something very interesting, I must admit. Remember that قاعدة فقهية الحكم على الشيء فرع عن تصوره. When you want to make a ruling, you got to understand reality. Data, statistics play a very important role in how we make a fatwa. Statistics actually say that the girls that have been molested, they are more likely to be molested by their brothers and stepfathers are actually the first and most important child molesters. The stepfathers. Al-Maliki madhab and Ibn Hazm took that in great consideration, that statistic that they come across, and they considered that this is a serious matter. And they considered that due to this statistic, saddan lidhara'i. What is sadd al-dhara'i? This is a qaida fiqhiyya. What is al-qaida al-fiqhiyya? Al-qaida al-fiqhiyya is basically a legal maxim. They would look at the Quran and the Sunnah and they would say, well, the whole reason why we would say a lot of the Islamic rulings is all about eliminating evil. And they said, well, we have to take those statistics in consideration. Therefore, when we know that the stepfather is the most probable molester, predator, then we have to take that in consideration and look at the ayah. رَبَائِبُكُمُ اللَّاتِي فِي بُيُوتِكُمْ. The Rabiba, when she was young and grew up as a young girl, in his eyes, he has gotten so used to her, like she was his own daughter. They said, we have to take that in consideration, and we have to make sure that when we understand and we look at the ayah, we have to consider that part in where we need to make sure that she stays safe, because the stepfather is one of the high-risk predators to be there. So take that in consideration, that dress appropriately. Don't necessarily take it as if it's really your mahram, but do take certain restrictions in consideration to maintain safety. Go ahead, my dear. You want me out? I'm
In 3 minutes.
I'm
You're
okay
done?
with that.
Okay. We're all gonna head out for Maghrib prayer, and then we're all gonna go meet back inside the main auditorium. Make sense? All right. Jazakallah khairan, guys.
And guys, you guys are really sure that they're guys.
Jazakallah khairan, everyone. Thank you so much, Sheikha. We're actually heading out to Maghrib prayer, so we're gonna start praying in 2 minutes.
All right, inshallah, we'll see you all. Barakallahu feekum and Rabbi yahfadkum jami'an. And inshallah, we'll see you.